National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard is revoking 37 security clearances for intelligence officials. Several of these officials had ties to former President Biden, and Gabbard says some of the officials were also involved in the investigation of Russia's influencing in the 2016 election. Now, Gabbard says the move is coming at the direction of President Trump. She posted on X saying having a security clearance is a privilege. Someone who betrays their oath to the Constitution betrays that trust. That those choosing their own self-interest over the public undermines the security and safety of Americans.
Now, this, of course, is garnering criticism from national security officials. They say she's accusing those getting clearances revoked of politicizing or leaking intelligence without any evidence. Mark Zaid, a national security attorney representing clients who have had clearance revoked while also having his own clearance stripped, posting this on X, calling this move a Privacy Act violation, that this is weaponization and a political move.
It's not all disdain coming from the national security community. Retired General Michael Flynn says more should be done, posting on X that companies holding security clearances should be investigated as well.
Look, I don't think that you want security officials leaking information. So obviously, part of what she's saying would be problematic to me. But I also feel like you're acting blind if you're going to turn the eye and pretend like this is not politicizing anybody who's ever had any access to Biden, worked on anything under the Biden administration. And the reason why this doesn't really make sense to me is because these people in these positions have served under multiple terms. And so they're not supposed to be politically aligned with anybody specific.
They're not supposed to be.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be. So I'm happy to get rid of anybody who is doing things egregious, like leaking information, causing lack of trust within our government institutions. I'm happy to always get those people out of those positions because we want to protect America first. But I do think that it's important to make sure that because under the direction of Trump, that he targets anybody who he considers a political enemy. And so he's over politicizing places that shouldn't be. And you should allow people to do their jobs. People looking into things and following through with orders under one administration or the next is actually just performing a duty you're asked to do. So now losing your job without any real information of data that's been leaked, because that's what's lacking here. Well, there's no real information of explain why these people why their clearances are being revoked. Give a detailed list to the public.
Why should they, couldn't it be a security issue to just have a permanent class of bureaucrats or former staffers, from both parties, fine, who just get access to intelligence briefings, and this list is not, trimmed from time to time? And doesn't the president get to come in and say, okay, I got voted in, I'm revoking it for all the, why are you, when you don't have a government job, you're a pundit basically now who still has access to this thing, you're not in government service anymore? That doesn't make sense to me. Why does it just go on forever? Well, doesn't the president get to say, yeah, you're done, you're turned off?
But I don't like you. We're done. It shouldn't be a popularity contest. It should be people that have access to information because they are in the position and authority to access that information. And I think when you start to just think about President Trump and just looking at how he's behaved over the last two presidencies now, the last one, this one, he's very much, If
I delete you from my mailing, whoever gets my mailing list, maybe that's hurtful, but there's not some right to be on it.
It always is a larger conversation about why are we doing these things? And kind of
he's doing them because they're saying these people were involved in Russiagate.
But they're not providing any proof.
They were getting.
They're not providing proof.
Well, they have. They provided lots of proof that ex-intelligence officials
all 37 people
of convincing the media that
no,
there
in
was
this
more
instance,
to
they're
see
not
with
providing
Russia.
37 examples of why 37 people are getting their clearances revoked. That's what I would like to see. I'm happy to get rid of any corruption within any agency of our government, right? I think everybody's on the same page. But it's just but they haven't provided it. And when you make something so public, like Tulsi Gabbard has been doing lately and often, you need to provide details and facts behind your decisions.
I'm going to give you a headline. 50 current and former intelligence officials say Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinfo. That's a headline from Politico about the letter sent from the Intelligence Committee signed by 50 different people that we've looked at this, and based on our expertise and the information we have access to, we think this very well could be a Russian disinformation plot. And that was false. It turned out they were wrong. It was genuine. The laptop was real. Russia didn't manufacture it. They were leveraging their expertise and their continued access to intelligence documents to engage in what amounted to be partisan political activity. That Joe Biden himself cited their letter when he was on the debate stage with Trump, said, well, look, you don't have to take it from me. Look at what the nonpartisan objective intelligence committee, people who serve in both administrations, look at what they've said. Look at them.
So these 37 people specifically were part of that exact scheme.
I'm saying this is why people can't just have access to intelligence forever and then continue to act in partisan political ways.
Right. I agree with that. I want to get rid of the partisan ways out of there. I think that we could definitely have looked into Biden much more. These are all past errors. We're in current day. And so if we continue this back and forth.
Cut off.
I know, but what happens in the future?
They're not putting them in jail.
What happens in the future? We just keep doing this. So anybody who's ever worked around President Trump, we get rid of them. We constantly just start cleaning house every time. Like, it's just petty back and forth. But it is this petty back and forth that I don't acknowledge or like on either side. It's not something that I think we should run our government by. Are people doing their job? Are they following through? Like, did we look into how Russia
then this is a philosophical difference. I think if the Democrats win the next election and they come to office, yeah, they get to review who gets intelligence briefings and give it to more Democrats and to fewer Trump people. I think they will obviously do that, but
they should provide information about why they're just like, there's been lots of money taken out from RFK, out of research. There's been lots of people fired under President Trump. There's like, what is the reason that you're firing people that are apolitical? I know, but
they're not apolitical.
Some people are supposed to be in positions that are apolitical. And what I would like to do, my biggest goal would be for the country, is to restore faith in places all over our government that people have lost faith in. That's the goal. And so part of it might be cleaning house with some of those people, but other part of it is stop continuing the partisan politics where you're just getting rid of people because of their adjacent proximity to a former president. Because that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that they
justified. It's justified. I don't want to restore that faith because that was a misguided.
So we should have no institutions then. We should just get rid of this background behind it.
The institution we have is, for better or worse, democracy. A team, a political party runs on a platform, and if they get more votes than the other team, they put their people in key government positions and run the government as they see fit. And if we don't like it, we vote them out of office, and the next people do it. It is weirder, I think, to say, no, there's going to be a permanent bureaucracy of government employees who continue to operate according to their own agenda that have very little political oversight. So even though you change the presidency and the lawmakers, you don't actually change the operations of the government. Isn't that more bizarre?
No, I think the more bizarre part is that anybody who had a criticism or has ever challenged President Trump, which should be okay, especially looking at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who have no problem aligning with him on most things but challenging him on some things, then we should not just say, oh, off with their heads, or they need to go, or they have no access. Mm-hmm. That is not how we want our government to perform. We do not live under a king, right? We are not in any type of reign. So I think that needs to be looked at. And whenever you have people getting let go or denied access that are supposed to be apolitical, keyword on supposed, because President Trump might be on his retribution campaign where he wants to get people back, retaliation campaign, well, then that, to me, should be looked at and reviewed to make sure that this is not just some political theater act that just gets him where he wants to be, which is only have yes men around him.
I think it's very hard to separate political and apolitical. I think it's all political. And people who say they're apolitical can still have an agenda.
It's not people. Whole agencies should be apolitical. People can stand wherever they want when they go in the poll, but their job is not supposed to be politically tied to anything.
Magic fairy wings and be able to
No, this is not an esoteric theory. This is a real thing. One of the biggest cable news networks in the country is undergoing a rebrand. MSNBC will soon be known as MS Now. It's an acronym that stands for My Source News Opinion World.
In their official announcement on Thursday, MSNBC says this name further underscores our mission to serve as your destination for breaking news and thoughtful analysis and remain the home for the perspective that you've relied on for nearly 30 years. Goes on to mention that this change is happening as part of a move to a new company known as Versant. I haven't figured it out yet, but we'll know that soon enough. That will also include other channels such as CNBC, the Golf Channel, and Sports Engine, which will no longer be considered part of NBC News.
Now, as part of the rebrand, MS Now will also be dropping the famous NBC Peacock logo. Reactions to the change have been mixed, to say the least, on social media. CNN's K-File saying, "What's the problem? This seems fine."
But Outkick founder Clay Travis says, good Lord, MSNBC's brand is so toxic that they won't even let them use the NBC brand anymore. MS Now, it looks like Ms. Now first is the first problem. There's so many problems with
like
this.
Mrs.?
This is one of the worst, like Miss or Mrs. There's so many problems with this. It's hard to even know where to begin. Well, that's the first one. MS Now makes me want to say MS-13 also, which is the terror group. It's It also looked, the logo, I can't get into why it looks bad on television, but it looks like it's sending a subliminal self-harm message if you look at it the way I did. You saw it. You saw what I was pointing out. Yes, you did.
I'm going to let you finish.
What else? Changing anything is always wrong and bad and stupid and dumb. And
wow, changing anything.
Yes.
So changing presidents, we should have stayed with Biden?
Changing corporate rebranding is always bad. Remember when HBO Max, which was or just HBO was a good name, HBO Max, then it's just Max. They dropped the HBO
Wow, you
part.
dropped the major
part
one.
Everybody knows what it is. They dropped it, and they realized eventually that was dumb. I used to think people like, in charge of big organizations who make, I don't know, like branding decisions, they're probably smart people. What do I know? I'm just a lowly TV host. I don't know anything. Now I know that those people just must not be very smart because they keep doing things like that, and it's just bad every time.
Okay, look, pump the brakes. Guys, just so everybody knows, I used to work at MSNBC. I started my career there for like
At Ms. Now?
At Ms. Now.
Ms. Now or Ms. Right Now?
I used to work at Ms. Now,
back
MSNBC, and I was there for the process. This is like, 15 years ago. So the process of when they were at their 15-year mark, just building to now, which is almost their 30-year mark, their brand really changed the way it looked, but it also helped solidify who they were in the space, because at the time when I first got there, they were doing like car chases, high-speed chases live, and now they're just heavy in politics. So they solidified who the brand is and have some real talented people over there that have, really worked hard to be synonymous with the brand. I understand that there's a breaking apart of two companies, and so NBC is the bigger parent company that's keeping their Peacock and everything, but CNBC is keeping CNBC exactly as it is and just changing what the acronyms mean. They're changing it to like, what is it? Like Consumer News and Business Channel.
Fine. No one's
but my point is like, why couldn't MSNBC just keep the name, change the logo, and just make it like, I don't know, major stories,
I agree.
news and bold commentary, like something that goes better.
I have disagreed with you a lot today, but I agree with that. They should keep it and have it stand for something else. Actually, an organization that I cite a lot, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, right? They were the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and then they broadened their scope, but they kept the same acronym. That is smart. Yes, right. That I agree with doing.
And just like when WWE went from WWF to WWE, I'm like, why couldn't they just figure out another word for the F instead of federation? Fine, it's not a federation.
Fighting.
Fighting. Like worldwide fighting.
Fisticuffs.
It's like so simple to do, but the fact that it's now, and it was just a mouthful. Like I was watching Morning Joe, like I always do. Mm-hmm. And even as Joe was saying, like we're separating ourselves and being independent. So I encourage it. What's wrong with it? But he also was trying to say what the new acronym stood for, and it was just taking a while. And that was like a little funny to watch, because it's like, this can't be such a mouthful. Like no one ever says MS anything. And the point is that it really bothers me is that MSNBC, if you know the history of it, was a merger between NBC News and Microsoft. Microsoft then left the building years ago, and they kept MS in the name.
Right. So why do you have to?
It's mean nothing for the last 15 years almost. Yeah. So the fact that Microsoft hasn't been involved in so long and it still kept MSNBC, they might as well have just kept it going, because it didn't mean anything for the longest time.
We could have come up with something for it to stand for. And they could
that was...
By the way, I felt the same way before someone tries to get me on hypocrisy. The Twitter rebrand. Sometimes I call it X. I still call it Twitter half the time.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
Because, no one knows what... how do you say, like, if someone sent a tweet? You say an X? Like, what do you say?
Right.
You still say a tweet. People still say that. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense, because an excerpt.
An excerpt.
Oh, wow.
See... our producer Louis should be working in loftier companies doing good.
And it felt like they were trying to like over-explain. I saw the executive's email because that was all over the reporting, and it was like, as we define this time to decide who we are, we have to step away and be our own person. And it's like, you can step away, just change the logo. Any logo would have been fine.
Most annoying corporate rebranding in my lifetime was definitely Comcast for Xfinity. Which was just because they were, everyone hated their customer service because it was like the worst on the planet. So like, we're just going to call it Xfinity now. Don't be mad at us.
I'm not
Same company.
mad though. I like Xfinity a lot. It's been very...
we just know it's Comcast.
That was one that actually worked. This one is too close to the original. And it's also going to be so interesting to watch this play out. And I hope they all succeed, because I have a lot of friends that still produce there and work there. But, it's just a totally different thing where they're not, they're going to be relying on themselves.
New reporting from the Daily Caller News Foundation reveals senior intelligence officials withheld classified information that COVID-19 came from a Wuhan lab while keeping the Trump administration in the dark. As a result, the report details how Anthony Fauci and his inner circle were able to push their narrative as they silenced scientists.
Now, former President Biden issued Fauci a preemptive pardon, but that's not stopping Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard from getting to the bottom of any potential wrongdoing.
Gabbard told DCNF reporter Emily Kopp, who broke this story, that she plans to hold the intel community accountable. Emily joins us now to discuss further. Great to see you, Emily. Welcome back to the program.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we turn to you and your expertise for updates on this story. What is this? What is the new information here? What is this report that was withheld from the Trump administration?
So it's not just one report. It's actually reports, analysis by our intelligence community's most elite spy scientists, people who you would want investigating the origins of a novel virus across the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Department of Energy, and the FBI, all found their analysis on this issue suppressed by higher-ups who did not have the same expertise. You had higher-ups with sometimes no more than a political science degree saying, Fauci said that this lab leak thing was a conspiracy theory, so we're not going to advance your analysis up the hierarchy. And so there's understandably been all of this attention on the recent flurry of declassifications related to the Russiagate scandal. But even before those declassifications started, I started digging into this other massive intelligence deception. The fact that higher-ups embedded across the deep state suppressed pretty clear circumstantial evidence pointing towards a lab origin of COVID across both the first Trump administration and then stretching over into the Biden administration. And the motive appears to have been that many people within the IC are, have a liberal ideology and have a neoliberal worldview, and their approach to biosecurity moving up until the COVID pandemic was that we need to forge partnerships with China, which of course led us to exporting very sensitive IP to China. And what I also found is that some of the very same scientists who were advising the intelligence community, I'm talking about people like Ralph Barrick, Christian Anderson, they're the kind of people who had this attitude of we need to forge partnerships with Chinese labs, and they weren't willing to look at the fact that this might have precipitated a global pandemic. So really essential intelligence, sophisticated work put together by the exact people in the intelligence community we would want examining this sort of thing never moved up the chain, and I think still remains out of view for the American public.
Now, a lot of things are uncovered by investigative journalism like your own, but some people and critics are going to say this feels like this investigation could be partly partisan or feel like an attack against Fauci or Biden. How would you respond to that, understanding that your outlet does have a conservative lean to it, that people would automatically connect those dots with how much criticism came with COVID and everything around it?
I think every American should be upset with Fauci, no matter what their political affiliation. This was somebody who was the head of U.S. biodefense. Much like J. Edgar Hoover, he was sort of embedded in government for decade upon decade upon decade, and accumulated massive influence over that time, overseeing a multi-billion-dollar portfolio. And when a novel virus came along that a lot of circumstantial evidence tied to a lab that he had sent funding to and sent sensitive IP to, he used his position as the head of U.S. biodefense, including multiple meetings with the National Security Council in January and February 2020, never mentioned this connection, and in the public, used his position as for a time, a trusted voice in the media to also suppress this theory that would have massive reputational consequences for him. So this is someone who put his own personal interests and covering his butt basically over national security. And there were a lot of other mini Faucis sort of embedded in the deep state as well, who, when presented with evidence, looking at the viral genome, and the viral genome contains clues suggesting engineering that Chinese authorities couldn't hide. Chinese authorities, they can, order their labs to destroy samples. They can delete sequences from databases. What they can't do is hide the genome of the virus itself. And our smartest scientists were saying there are clear signs that this is a lab-generated virus embedded in the genome that Chinese authorities are powerless to hide. And Fauci used his enormous influence to suppress that fact. COVID infected Democrats and Republicans, and I think no matter what your affiliation is, you should be upset that you were deceived for years.
Right. I don't want evidence one way or the other suppressed at all. If more information emerges to support a natural spillover event, great. I want to hear about it. I hope our intelligence officials consider that, write about it, and release reports to that effect to the public. Let's talk a little bit more and quickly, because we'll unfortunately have to go, but accountability for we talk tons about accountability for Fauci, but who are these kinds of people who get to, who are above the decisions or the intelligence being gathered by the Energy Department or the FBI and whoever it is? There's people above them that get to say, oh yeah, we're not going to bring this to the president's attention. Like, that seems to me to be the real crisis, that there's some layer of unaccountable bureaucrats who get to conceal from from the president. At the same time as when you have Congress and the president, even Biden agreeing, declassify COVID information. They voted on that years ago, and then we get nothing, or we get something that I think is totally not responsive to what we asked for. It's that middle layer of bureaucracy, is it not?
That's absolutely right. The bad news there is that we very rarely get any sort of insight or accountability into that sort of deep state middle layer. The good news is that you sort of have an extraordinary figure in our current DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. I was just yesterday at Liberty Crossing, which is like the ODNI campus, and they announced that they were slashing 40% of these middle layer bureaucrats. They've also revoked security clearances of folks who were found to participate in the weaponized, in some cases, fully manufactured intelligence related to Russiagate. One of those people happened to be Beth Sanner, who prepared President Trump's presidential daily briefs in that 2020 period where a lot of this evidence was being suppressed. They also announced, the ODNI and Gabbard announced yesterday that they were getting rid of the National Counterproliferation and Biosecurity Center, which is this center that was embedded in the ODNI overseeing biosecurity matters. And the leadership of that center specifically was involved in suppressing intelligence related to COVID, probably starting from a lab, and called it a conspiracy theory. So you have, I think, an extraordinary moment in American history where we're seeing some cleaning house within our intelligence community and some declassifications. And again, there hasn't been as much attention to this issue as the Russiagate declassifications, but I do know that this remains a priority, and my hope is that we do start seeing some of those declassifications, Robbie, that we've been waiting for since 2023.
Certainly.
So.
Emily Kopp of the Daily Caller News Foundation, always glad to have you on the case. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Leaders from Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy and Finland are all set to meet with President Trump today, along with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It comes just days after Trump's historic summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday, where they did discuss a peace deal in Ukraine, a meeting from which Zelensky was notably absent.
Those European leaders announcing that they would be attending the meeting alongside Zelensky in an apparent move to present a united front, and to avoid another confrontation between Trump and Zelensky, like the now infamous February Oval Office encounter. The Associated Press, quoting the former head of France's military mission at the UN, saying The Europeans are very afraid of the Oval Office scene being repeated, and so they want to support Mr. Zelensky to the hilt. It's a power struggle and a position of strength that might work with Trump. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio pushed back hard on the idea that Zelensky needed backup to avoid being bullied by Trump. Let's take a listen.
There is concern from the Europeans that President Zelensky is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you
No, it isn't. That's not why they're
reassure
coming
them?
as back. That's not true. This is such a stupid media narrative that they're coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelensky into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks on this stuff. They're coming here tomorrow because they chose to come here tomorrow. We invited them to come.
President Trump is already putting some pressure on Zelensky, making it clear the ball is in his court. He wrote in a post on True Social Sunday, President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started? No getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired. No going into NATO by Ukraine. I don't know if it's putting bullying Zelensky to say he hopes he comes to an agreement. I don't know.
Perhaps not bullying, although Trump certainly holds, to use his preferred metaphor, a lot of cards here in the sense that Ukraine is obviously dependent on American aid continuing. Right. Yes, there's been some move to try to sort of funnel that through the European allies.
In the same way that I wouldn't have said that Trump was bullying Putin when he was frustrated with him and said he's got however many days or we're going to sanction. Like it's diplomacy. We're negotiating a complicated political situation. We're bringing European allies in for it. I think that's good. I don't have any. Some on the right hate Zelensky. I don't hate Zelensky at all. He's doing the best he can for his country. He's done a lot of things in the course of prosecuting this war that I disagree with in terms of the domestic politics of the country, suspension of rival political parties and independent media that I think is illiberal and bad. I think it was. I don't care that he doesn't wear a suit when he comes to the Oval Office.
Such a weird focus.
And even their infamous Oval Office meltdown, I don't know, I kind of like seeing my leaders argue or debate in public rather than behind closed doors for a change. It's fine. It's all fine to me, and I hope it's coming toward peace.
So I think the not wearing a suit is fine. I have no objection to that. I had a much stronger reaction, it sounds like, to the February meeting than you did. Not because I dislike seeing people debate in public. I'm all in favour of that. I just felt that A, Zelensky was ambushed, in my view, particularly by J.D. Vance more so than Trump. And then second of all, I felt that the whole framing of the debate was just inaccurate and unfair. I mean, the framing of the debate was that somehow Zelensky was the one who was digging his heels in and frustrating a conclusion to a war that was begun by his country being invaded. Like, that's the fundamental reality. Yes, we can talk about NATO expansionism. We can talk about whether the US broke promises in the past. But the catalyst for the war is that Putin sent his army into Zelensky's country.
Of course. But my sense is that at that point, Zelensky's conviction that he can't agree to any territorial concessions was stronger then than it is now. Now I think he's in much more the realm of reality, and that's good. And I'm fine with them holding out. Again, if there's no security guarantee for Ukraine, what's the point of them making a deal? If that would clearly, to me, signal Russia just intends to go forward with the conquest. One way or the other, we're all being played. We should then just not engage at all. So the security agreement is very important if that's part of it. And then if it is, I think let's get this done so we can get Donald Trump his Nobel Peace Prize that he deserves.
Over my dead body, Donald Trump is going to get the
first
Nobel
Azerbaijan
Peace Prize.
and Armenia, now this. I joked about this with Lindsay. She just loved this. You'll love this just as much. We need to create a even bigger peace award to give to Donald Trump, because the Nobel Peace Prize is already sullied by Barack Obama having gotten it for doing nothing. So,
giving the world hope of a new order.
My God. It was a participation trophy. They turned it into a participation trophy.
It was setting a new tone after all
well,
the
even you
bitterness
must
of the
concede
Iraq
that
War.
was a little bit premature in terms of what Barack Obama actually accomplished.
I mean, I guess it. I mean, I guess it was, but I think that Trump is.
They got swept up in the hopium.
I enjoyed the hopium, and I thought it was much better than what Trump is doing. But the point here is that Trump just seemingly wants a deal, not exactly at any cost, but he seems to care more about the achievement of a deal than any principle that is at stake here. And I've said, and we said in the earlier
That's
segment,
probably characteristic of foreign policy.
But there's an important question at stake as to whether Putin is going to simply get away with invading a neighbor. And I'm less defeatist than you are about the overall situation, because you could, in fact, ramp up the economic cost on Russia. You could continue to aid Ukraine to the point where the attritional effect on Russia becomes greater, and therefore, up the motivation on Putin to make a deal. Putin has very little incentive to make a deal now because he's advancing on the battlefield, partly because the US has been dwindling away in terms of its level of backing for Ukraine.
I don't think they seem willing to stomach so many losses on the Russian side. Would increasing support to Ukrainian troops, if it's arms and aid, what more can they accomplish? There, at some point, they're going to be. My understanding is their even ability to just use arms that are given to them is going downhill pretty rapidly because they're running through the military age population. Now, if you're saying, certainly if troops were committed by a European country or by the U.S., then yes, I agree, then that would change the calculation in the battle.
Nobody wants to do that.
But we are not willing to do that.
Right.
Is Europe willing to do that? I don't think they are either. Right. At which point, I'm not sure. Yes, we could adjust the dial and cause more destruction to Russia in a short term, maybe an intermediate term, but I don't. So then tons more Ukrainians die. And what's the end result?
Well, tons more Ukrainians die,
and
or
die.
Alternatively, Putin eventually thinks, well, look, I need to actually sue for peace as well here because the mutual costs of this are too severe.
I just don't see any evidence that he thinks that way. I think he says, no, so be it. We'll lose another 500,000 Russians or whatever.
But one of the things that is insulating him from domestic pressure is the fact that the economic consequences have not been sufficiently dire as to actually create that pressure or intensify that pressure on him.
I've become so, every time I hear someone, even people I think are credible, say, oh yes, this is unpopular and for various reasons, the regime could be threatened, could be toppled from within, that just always ends up being pie in the sky fantasy.
Yeah, I'm not saying the regime would be toppled, but I'm saying that you could change the dynamics and the calculus for Putin beyond just saying, well, we're going to choke off aid to Ukraine anyway, and then expect Putin to do a deal when his troops are advancing. If his troops are advancing, what incentive does he have to do a deal?
Since taking office in January, we've seen President Trump target several institutions that he disagrees with, including colleges, universities, and even law firms. Now it appears his administration is setting its sights on the Smithsonian museums here in D.C.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump took issue with the Smithsonian, saying in part, quote, everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been.
Trump went on to say that he's instructed his attorneys to review the museum, starting the same process that was done at universities earlier this year. So this could include changing or replacing exhibits that are deemed too divisive, according to a letter sent by White House officials. Now, reactions to Trump's message have been pouring in. Congressman Jim McGovern called it un-American, saying, quote, anyone who thinks there's anything good about enslaving human beings has no business running any country. And then there's commentator Brian Tyler Cohen, who said, quote, Trump is mad that the Smithsonian is talking about how bad slavery was. That's where we're at.
But naturally, there are others agreeing with Trump's perspective that the museums should be more positive. Charlie Kirk shared his thoughts, writing in part, quote, Americans have so much to be proud of. This is the greatest republic on the planet. The Smithsonian, the National Museum system of our capital city, should reflect our national greatness. And columnist Scott Jennings saying, it's true that slavery is one of the darkest chapters of American history, but it's also true that lots of brave Americans fought a war to end it. The question President Trump is asking is, are we going to define our country based on our worst moments or our best moments?
You know, America seems like one of the places that I've been that really has and I travel a lot because I literally have a travel show that has a problem like atoning or fully dealing with its past. And I think by building the African American History and Culture Museum, there was an actual attempt to really show people not only the resilience and all the things that he wants to talk about of success, but also you literally journey through the museum and understand the implications and impacts you feel, you touch, you experience, what slavery could have been like from a viewership perspective to see how horrid it was, and you go upstairs as things get more resilient and actually experience it. So trying to tear that down seems odd to me, especially when it's not overemphasizing slavery. It's literally spending the amount of emphasis that covers the amount of time and the amount of, ways that it contributed to the way that America was fundamentally built and actually is today. Like, you can't disregard what happened and disregard how it directly connects with what still happens today.
Well,
I mean, cotton was picked, land was made, people were made rich off of slave. Like, this is all stuff that...
Okay, but that's true of every civilization that has ever existed.
But America can talk...
Why do we have to... Look, slavery, the dark chapters in American history should be taught and recognized and are. I would challenge you on the notion that we have difficulty atoning for our past. I mean, schools teach American history. In fact, I was discussing this with Niall the other day. My problem with teaching American history is we don't teach anything recent because it starts in the same place, and now more history is developing as time goes on. And the Civil War period is covered in I can't vouch for every single school in America, obviously, but is part of the curriculum in all school districts. It is exhaustively covered, the horror of slavery and then the horror of the Civil War and how many people died as an effort to end it. So I just don't...
Well, I don't think that I mean in schools, literally. I mean adults
America.
Trying to pretend like when people say blanket statements like, oh, what does that have to do with me or slavery? Like even the Jillian Michaels thing, I heard her whole interview on CNN, if you guys had watched her, and she talked a little bit about why she like statistics that make no sense. Like only 2% of people were slave owners at the time. Well, she's not accounting for the fact that children, multiple of them, and wives were not counted in that process. So if you had a home that benefited off of slave owners, or if you had an adjacency like a family member or a cousin that also used your slaves when you needed them, these are all benefiting off slave-free labor and things that were experienced in our society. And so when you have that mentality and adults that have platforms that say things like, it doesn't affect society in any way, or we need to move past this, it's really just not acknowledging that there's two ways to have the full conversation, is really understanding the history and then seeing where we are and accepting and embracing the accomplishments, celebrating the accomplishments,
I agree with all that.
but also saying we have a long stretch of work to do in order to continue to move forward.
I agree with all that, but some people on the left act as if America, as the United States, is the only country or the only civilization of which slavery was an aspect. And again, that is not true. Every empire, every civilization from Asia to the Middle East to Africa to Europe to America to South America took slaves as prisoners of war, enslaved, raped, killed, pillaged, and then used slave labor. Like, that is just true. What is unique,
I understand the history of the world, but in somebody who's speaking from an America First perspective all the time, I'm talking about our country. I'm talking about in 2017, Donald Trump went to go visit the same museum that he's criticizing. And these are quotes, because I remember that visit, and it was so profound because he left right after accepting his position in office and saying he was, quote, deeply proud about the, quote, unbreakable American spirit. He was so happy to be part of this meaningful reminder and wish he could have spent all day there understanding the horrors of what our society has experienced. So how do you go from 2017 to having all this admiration for what was built and what was examined through your personal tour of this same museum, but then in 2025, like, did you just all of a sudden just forget that you had these thoughts and profound feelings, and now you want to get rid of some of the installations that you haven't seen in years, probably, because all of a sudden it's too woke? Like, what's woke about slavery? It's
nobody had a problem. Let's be clear. Nobody had a problem with the African American History Museum until their website had that aspects of white supremacy,
which they apologized for. So and they took down.
And I'm glad they did that. And again, I have no problem, nor do I, even if I did have some problem with the museum, I would not think the federal government should waste time. I don't want the government to dictate the exhibits at the museum. Frankly, I would just privatize all the museums, and then they can do whatever they want and find their own.
You always say that. Take all the federal money out of it.
But federal money out of everything, and then you have it. Then it's neat and clean, and then have your museum however you want.
And history is not based off of whatever Trump thinks is too inappropriate or whatever Biden thinks is not enough information about the horrors.
Okay, the left wants to rewrite history.
No, the Smithsonian was created by
Earth.
no. Smithsonian was created independently to showcase actual facts in history, which it does. I've been there multiple times to that specific museum, and it does an amazing job of detailing the history of our country, which is just traumatic sometimes, but also brilliant sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that no politician should get that deeply involved with their hand in weaving what that, it's like no politician should get deeply involved in weaving what a textbook should look like. No politician should get deeply involved in weaving what museums should look like. They should allow the millions of people that come here and learn about the horrors and the brilliancy of our country to continue to do that amongst all these free museums in DC and go and experience these things. I mean, every Sunday you can walk around this beautiful city and really have the best time of your lives. For somebody like me with children that can learn, for people international that don't really understand the full capacity of our country, they can learn and really experience and understand and start from a place of understanding rather than a start from criticism and saying, oh, you're too this, you're too that. Like maybe if you just understood the history, then you just have more empathy for many of the things that have come from slavery, like systemic things that we're still working on fixing in our society.
Yeah, we can talk about it, and we do talk about it. Again, it is the left has this wrong idea that it's not acknowledged, or we talk about it a lot, and as we should. It was something in our somewhat recent history that was overcome here as it was overcome everywhere else across the globe. And we fought a really bloody war that tons and tons of people died in, that the whole South burned to end. And so we conquered that evil. And again, that's something that is taught and should be taught. And I take umbrage sometimes at the left pretending like there's never been a worse and more evil. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm recalling past arguments I've had with people who are, I think, further to the left than you are, who are just like, America is the great Satan.
I mean, there's always more work to be done, though. I don't like to compare it to other countries because in any other argument, you don't want to compare America to other countries. Right. We're just not them.
Are those other countries doing a lot of time reflecting on all the evil things they did?
Well, actually, yeah, I spent a lot of time in South Africa, and the way that they're atoning for apartheid, which is way more recent in the 90s, is much more, let's discuss it, let's bring it to the forefront. We understand how egregious it was, and the conversation is welcome rather than shunned. Like, all right, we talked about this already, and I'm not talking about in textbooks. I'm talking about from their leadership, from the highest authorities there. Like, the conversation is an open book of like, yeah, this was terrible. All these things were attached to it. In fact, our World of Travel season 2 is about that largely, about how they dealt with some of their transgressions and how they're moving forward by trying to create space and provide land for people that probably own the land prior to get stolen from them, because of the color of their skin. So there's so much to discuss here and unpack. I know we only have a little bit of time, but I think like, yes, other countries are doing it better than us. Yes.